She used my address to get her mail and packages after she'd moved out. She said, "What's the big deal? We're still friends." I kept agreeing. It only became a big deal when I started legally marking every piece of her mail "Return to sender, addressee unknown." My ex-girlfriend Tiffany and I broke up 6 months ago. At least, I thought we broke up. According to the United States Postal Service, FedEx, UPS, DHL, Amazon Prime, and about 73 different online clothing retailers, our relationship has never been stronger. As far as the entire global logistics network is concerned, she still lives in my apartment. I am no longer her boyfriend. I have been demoted to her unpaid full-service mailroom and package receiving clerk. The breakup itself was actually pretty civilized. There was no screaming, no throwing things. It was one of those slow, sad fizzles. We just wanted different things. I wanted a partner to build a life with. She wanted a partner to fund her hobbies and applaud her social media presence. So, we had the talk. We agreed to go our separate ways. She packed up most of her things over a weekend and moved in with a friend across town. It was mature, it was amicable, and then the mail started. It began innocently enough. A week after she moved out, a small package arrived for her. I texted her, "Hey, you got a package from Sephora." She replied, "OMG, I totally forgot to change that address. You're a lifesaver. Can you just leave it in the lobby? I'll swing by and grab it tomorrow." I was happy to do it. We were trying to be friends after all. A week later it was a bank statement, then a fashion magazine, then a subscription box for artisanal, gluten-free dog treats. Tiffany does not own a dog. I brought it up to her gently. "Hey Tiff," I said over the phone one day, after a particularly large box of fast fashion clothes had arrived. "You're going to want to get on changing your address on these accounts. Stuff is still showing up here almost every day." "Oh, I know," she sighed, her voice full of a practiced, weary drama. "I've just been so swamped with the move and everything. It's such a hassle. Would you mind just holding on to it for me for a little while longer? It would be a huge help." Like a fool, I agreed. I was trying to be the cool ex. I didn't want to be petty. So I became her unofficial post office. My once clean entryway slowly transformed into a monument to her consumerism. It was a rotating museum exhibit of her fleeting interests. One week, it was a set of professional watercolor paints. The next, a yoga mat and a set of weights. Then a home brewing kit for kombucha. She had more hobbies than a bored billionaire, and I had the boxes to prove it. I became an expert in the geography of her life. I knew her credit card billing cycle from the statement arrivals. I knew what new diet she was trying from the subscription boxes. I knew what weddings she was attending from the fancy dress deliveries. I knew more about her life after we broke up than I did when we were together. The breaking point came about 3 months in. I came home from a long day at work to find a massive, heavy box blocking my front door. It was a flat-pack, assemble-it-yourself Scandinavian bookshelf. It had taken all of the delivery driver's strength to get it to my third-floor apartment. I had to wrestle this thing into my living room, where it took up the entire floor space. I called her, my patience finally worn thin. "Tiffany," I said, my voice tight, "you have a bookshelf in my living room. A bookshelf that I had to drag inside. This has to stop. You have to change your address. Today." And that's when she said the words. The magical, infuriating words that would become the catalyst for my descent into petty bureaucratic warfare. She laughed, a light, airy, unconcerned laugh. "Oh my God, Mark, what's the big deal?" she said. "It's just a bookshelf. I'll get it this weekend. We're still friends, aren't we? Friends help each other out." What's the big deal? We're still friends. It was the perfect manipulative statement. It was designed to make me feel like the unreasonable one, the petty, uncaring ex who wasn't being a good friend. She wasn't asking for a favor. She was stating a fact of our new relationship. She would continue to use me for the conveniences of our old life, and if I had a problem with it, I was the one who was failing at being a friend. I stood there, looking at the giant 7-foot-long box of particle board, and I felt a switch flip in my brain. The cool ex was dead. In his place was a man who had just been given a new, clear purpose. "You know what, Tiff?" I said, my voice suddenly calm and cheerful. "You're absolutely right. We are friends. Don't you worry about a thing. I'll take care of it." "Thanks, Mark," she said, relieved. "You're the best. Always happy to help a friend, I replied. And I meant it. I was about to help her become a much more responsible, independent adult. The lessons were going to be harsh, but they were, in their own way, an act of friendship. A very, very passive-aggressive act of friendship. That night, I didn't sleep. I researched. I became a student, a scholar, a veritable monk devoted to the sacred texts of the United States Postal Service. I delved into the deep, arcane lore of the domestic mail manual. I read about mail forwarding, about holds, and most beautifully about the proper handling of mail for a person who no longer resides at an address. I learned that it is a federal offense to open, destroy, or intentionally delay the mail of another person. However, I also learned that I was under no legal obligation to accept mail for a non-resident. In fact, the USPS regulations provided a clear, simple, and legally sound protocol for just such a situation. The magic words were, "Return to sender, addressee unknown." It was perfect. It wasn't angry, it wasn't emotional, it was a calm, bureaucratic, and utterly devastating solution. I wasn't throwing her mail away, I was simply informing the sender of a clerical error. I was a good citizen, helping to maintain the integrity of our nation's postal system. My new hobby began the very next day. I went to an office supply store and bought a large red ink stamp pad and a custom-made rubber stamp that read, in big, official-looking block letters, "Return to sender." I also bought a fine-tip pen, specifically for writing the clarifying phrase, "Addressee unknown." The first piece of mail to receive the treatment was a catalog for a high-end kitchen supply store. I laid it on my dining room table like a patient on an operating table. I inked the stamp, took a deep, cleansing breath, and brought it down with a satisfying thwack. The bright red letters were a thing of beauty. I then wrote, in my neatest print, "Addressee unknown." I dropped it in the outgoing mail slot in my apartment lobby. It felt incredible. It felt like justice. It became my morning ritual. I'd make my coffee, sit down with the day's delivery of her mail, and perform the ceremony. A credit card bill? Thwack. Addressee unknown. A wedding invitation? Thwack. Addressee unknown. Her alumni magazine? Thwack. Addressee unknown. I was a gatekeeper, a stoic guardian protecting my home from the relentless siege of her consumerism. The packages were even more satisfying. For the larger boxes from Amazon and other retailers, I would print out a new label with my red stamp and a note. Refused, return to sender. I'd then drop them off at the post office on my way to work. The postal clerks got to know me. I was the guy with all the returned packages. I just told them my old roommate had moved out without leaving a forwarding address. They'd just nod sympathetically. They had no idea I was a warrior engaged in a silent, brutal campaign of bureaucratic revenge. For the first 2 weeks, there was silence. I knew the effects wouldn't be immediate. A returned bill takes time to register as unpaid. A returned package takes time to process. I just kept up my daily ritual, a patient fisherman dropping his lines and waiting for a bite. And then, the first bite came. It was a text from Tiffany. "Hey, weird question, but did you get my new issue of Vogue? It's usually here by now." I typed back, "A picture of innocence." "Nope, haven't seen it. Mail has been so slow lately. Hope it turns up." She didn't reply. But I could feel the first tiny tremor of confusion from across the city. The ripples had begun. The first few returned letters and magazines were just the appetizers. The main course of consequences began to arrive about a month into my campaign. It started with her bills. I knew she was terrible with money, and she relied on the paper statements as a reminder to pay. Without those reminders, she was lost. I found this out when she called me, her voice a little more strained this time. "Mark, this is so weird," she said. "My credit card company just called me and said my payment is 30 days late. I never got the bill. Are you sure you haven't seen it?" I feigned a deep, sympathetic concern. "Wow, that's terrible, Tiff. A late fee on that card is probably huge." "No, I swear, I haven't seen a thing. You really need to get your address updated with them. You can't trust the postal service these days." I know, she said, frustrated. "I'll get to it." But she didn't. Because a week later, I got a frantic call. My car insurance, they canceled my policy. They said they sent me 2 warning notices, but I never got them. "Mark, I could get in a huge accident and not be covered." "That's awful," I said, my voice dripping with fake empathy. "You've got to call them right now and sort that out. Maybe they can email you the notices instead?" I was a master of unhelpful, reasonable-sounding suggestions. The real fun began with the packages, the big, important ones. She had a friend's wedding coming up. She had ordered a custom-made dress from an online boutique, a $400 dress. A week before the wedding, she called me in a full-blown panic. The dress. The tracking number says it was delivered 2 weeks ago, but I never got it. Did you see a box from Elegant Stitches? Nope, doesn't ring a bell, I said, picturing the refused return to sender label I had gleefully slapped on that very box. Did you call the company? Yes, she wailed. They said it was successfully returned to them because the addressee was unknown. They said they can reship it, but it won't get here in time for the wedding. Now I have nothing to wear. Oh, Tiff, that's a nightmare, I said. What are you going to do? I could hear her crying on the other end of the phone. The beautiful part was, she still didn't suspect me. She was blaming the post office, the delivery companies, the universe. She was so wrapped up in her own self-importance that she couldn't imagine a world where her friend Mark would do anything other than cater to her every need. The grand finale, the event that finally brought the whole thing crashing down, was a package from her work. She had been working on a big freelance project, and her client was overnighting her a hard drive with the final critical files. She called me on a Thursday. "Okay, Mark, this is seriously important," she said, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "I have a package from a client coming to your place. It's a FedEx overnight. I need you to watch for it like a hawk. My entire project depends on it." "Of course, Tiff," I said. "I'll keep an eye out." The FedEx driver arrived the next morning. He handed me the padded envelope. I looked at it. It was addressed to Tiffany. I looked at the driver. "I'm sorry," I said, with a look of polite confusion. "I think you have the wrong address. No one by that name lives here." The driver looked at his scanner, then at the label. "It says apartment 3B. "I'm in 3B, I said, shrugging. "But I don't know a Tiffany. You'll have to return it to the sender." The driver, bound by his own set of rules, nodded, made a note on his scanner, and walked away with the package. The phone call I received an hour later was not a person speaking. It was a sound of a human soul being put through a shredder. It was a shriek of pure apocalyptic rage, the likes of which I have never heard before or since. "You!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "It was you. The dress, the bills, the hard drive. You've been returning everything. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to ruin you." I waited for the hurricane of her rage to subside. When she finally paused to take a breath, I spoke, my voice the calm, quiet eye of the storm. "Tiffany," I said, "it is a federal offense to knowingly obstruct the delivery of mail. However, it is also a federal offense to tamper with mail that is not addressed to you. As you no longer reside at this address, I am legally obligated to not accept your mail. I am not your mailroom. I am not your secretary. I am a private citizen in his own home, and you, my friend, are an unknown addressee." The silence on the other end was a beautiful thing. It was the sound of a person who had just been checkmated by a set of rules she never bothered to learn. Her friendship had been a one-way street of convenience. The road was now officially closed. The next day, she showed up at my apartment, unannounced. She was a wreck. Her eyes were red, her hair was a mess. She had clearly been up all night, dealing with the fallout from her missed deadline. She didn't yell. The fight was gone. "Please, Mark," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Just tell me what you did with the bookshelf." I pointed to the corner of my living room. There, fully assembled and filled with my own books, was the Scandinavian bookshelf she had ordered months ago. "You said you'd get it that weekend," I said with a shrug. "You never did. So I put it together. It's a pretty nice bookshelf." The look on her face was one of complete and utter defeat. She had lost her mail, her packages, her credit score, a major client, and now her bookshelf. All because she couldn't be bothered to fill out a change of address form. She just turned and walked away. I closed the door, and for the first time in 6 months, my apartment felt truly and completely my own. The ghost tenant had finally been evicted. My friendship, it turned out, did not include free mail handling services, a lesson she had to learn one return package at a time.